Hello everyone, Mark from Speed of Light Media. I want to talk to you today about how you can use Simplify Cloudlab to simplify your QA test process. Simplify Cloudlab allows you to quickly get your test workloads running in the cloud by creating these templates that we call apps that represent the environment that you want to test. Let me show you quickly what one looks like. So this is a kind of a sample web app. It's got a load balancer, 3 web front ends, a database server, each in a different subnet. So that's the sample app that we'll use for our demonstration. We'll talk to you a bit about how quick and easy it is to configure one of these after we show you how it works. When we think about the use cases, we think about two different personas. We have the semi-technical person that would build out and maintain these apps, version them and make sure they're sized correctly and all those kind of things. Doesn't have to be a super technical person. It doesn't need to be a DevOps guru building this stuff in Amazon Web Services, because the designer kind of abstracts a lot of those technical details away. You can configure a machine with a lot of different options, so you need to know a little bit about firewall rules and IP addresses and things like that, but you don't need to really have a deep understanding. The other persona is really the QA tester, and let's look at that one first. The QA tester can just come in here and simply start one of these copies. We give you the option to prevent it from being terminated or prevent it from being snapshot if you want to. The use case there would be, I'm going to be doing some testing for a while, some load testing. I don't want somebody to come along and think they're doing some cleanup on an environment that is not being used. Now, if we go over here to the running copies, we'll see that this one's spinning up, but to save some time, I've spun up some others. But I want to keep an eye on this because it's only going to take a minute or two to provision this entire environment. Now, this is the same environment that's already running, and if I come in here to the streaming video interface, I can connect to any of these machines in the environment. And we have the load balancer, we have the database server. We can send the Control-Alt-Delete here and log right in. Do any additional configuration or upgrades that we need. We have the 3 web server web front ends that are Ubuntu servers. Maybe I'm going to go in there and configure those or update them to the latest version or whatever it is that I need to do. Once I've done that, I can come in here and create a snapshot, and this will create a new app and create an image of all 5 of these machines in their current state. So the new app will have all the images in the current state, but I'll also have these machine images if I want to decide to build out another app and I don't want to start from scratch. So let's give this a name real quick here. We'll call this version 2.2 and we'll create the copy. So that process has started, and you see this one is finished already. So that was pretty quick to provision 5 machines, the network configuration and all of the things that are required there. And we see this is copying. And if we come over here, all of these environments are built from machine images. And we give you a variety of public images to choose from. And then once this snapshot is complete, when we come over to private images, you'll see those images listed here as well. So we'll let that run. But you might be thinking like, okay, I've got my web app, I've got it configured the way I want to, everything's ready for testing. Of course, we can go in and manually test, but really the goal is to have everything configured for test automation. So we have another running copy here that is our test automation environment. And if we look here, we have, well, this might be a better view to see what we have in here. We have 3 automation machines in one subnet. So a little simpler than the previous version. But one thing we did here is we have the concept of additional connections. So I have a shared network here that is shared between this copy and the web application copy. So these automation machines can communicate with the load balancer in the other environment. If we go back to the other environment here, into the designer, we'll see the load balancer also has this same shared network connection. So I can spin up, this could be 3 machines, this could be 10 machines if I wanted to do some load testing. But let's just say for regular automation, it requires 3 machines. It's going to pull 1,000 or so tests out of a repository and execute them against the web server. And these are configured now with a public IP address that will allow you to tie this in with some other process that you have, some other workflow, maybe a CI/CD process that on code commit, the build is kicked off, the changes are deployed, and then an automation run is run against the environment to make sure the developers didn't just break something. So ideally, that's the kind of system that you could set up here in Cloudlab. You could also move your CI/CD process into Cloudlab itself. So this is just one server. Let's say it's a Jenkins server that's part of your process. Same thing, it's got a public IP address. It's got the shared connection into the environment. And that will allow you to kick off your CI/CD process. Maybe the Jenkins server downloads all the artifacts, pushes them to the new web, and then signals the test automation process to kick off. So you can see how all that ties in very nicely. And the nice thing about having these in separate copies versus having your test automation and your CI/CD process as part of your web app, well, you probably wouldn't have that in your production environment that way to begin with. But this also allows you to reuse these test automation servers to point to multiple versions of your web app. Speaking of versions, let's go back here and check on our machine images. So these are the images that were created in the snapshot process. So we see that it's probably complete. Let's go back here. Yep, we see we have our version 2.2. Now I could start a copy of that if I wanted to. But let's say I want to jump right into version I want to create an environment that can be upgraded to version 3. Now we'll flip over to kind of that semi-technical persona and create a new app. And we're going to call this Web App V3. We give you the option to run in either your Amazon Web Services account or in our data center, our cloud. There are pros and cons to each, and we can get into those at some point. But for now, we'll run this in our Speed of Light Media Cloud. If you remember, that environment had a network, 3 subnets, and 5 machines. And just that quick, you can see how easy it is to configure this. And I do need to do a little bit of configuration here. I need to figure out which machine images we want to use for each machine. I need to set these subnets to the correct CIDR. And this is where you have to have a little bit of knowledge, but not a ton. The designer will guide you through it. If you don't have these set right, it will warn you. So this, if you remember, this first machine was a load balancer machine. And now I have the load balancer image already configured from my last snapshot. We'll make this a medium size. And this one needed a public IP address. And if I'm going to give that a public IP address, I also need to allow internet access on the subnet. Now these other 2 subnets are not exposed to the internet, but we will facilitate communication between the load balancer and the web servers by adding an additional connection to subnet 10.10.2, which is where the web servers are. And then remember, we want to add an additional connection to the CI/CD network so that our different tools can communicate with this process. If you remember, these were web server 01 to 03. And again, we have those images all ready to go. We'll make those large. These don't need a public IP address, but they do need a connection to the shared network, and they also need a connection to the database subnet. And web server 02. I'll do this again. Large, additional connections, need that one. And we need 10.10.3. And web server 03. Make it large and add our connections. And then finally our database server. And that's our database server. Make that one a large or extra large. And this one just needs, and that's really it. You see how easy it is to facilitate your QA test process with Simplify Cloudlab. Thanks for your time today.